Good afternoon. I'm Helen from the Global Opportunities team, and today I'm going to be running this session on studying in Australia and New Zealand through Cardiff University's International Exchange Programme. So just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We'll be recording the session, but feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box and I'll try to answer them all at the end of the presentation. Any questions that I do not have the opportunity to answer at the end of the session will be noted and we'll email you with a response as soon as possible. And just to let you know, all attendees will be automatically muted throughout the webinar. Before I start, I also just wanted to point out that most of the photos in this presentation were actually taken by past students on their placements in Australia and New Zealand. So just to give you a little flavour of what it's like to do your placement in those countries, you can have a look at the photos as I go through. So before we start the main part of the presentation, I just wanted to introduce myself. So hi, I'm Helen and I've worked within the Global Opportunities team for over 6 years and have recently started working on the International Exchange Programme. When I was a student, I spent a year abroad working as a language assistant at a high school in Brittany in France, which was challenging, but overall an incredible experience. And I'm still obsessed with crepes and galettes to this day. I've also completed a couple of internships in Lyon and Bordeaux and worked as an au pair in Paris since I did my year abroad. So I would say that my experiences of living and working abroad has given me a great opportunity to meet lots of new friends from all over the world who I'm still in touch with, to experience life in a different culture, and it's definitely provided me with lots of invaluable examples that I've used in my job interviews and applications over the years. And I'm sure my experiences abroad are definitely a big part of why I'm doing the job I'm doing today. So let's kick off. So you may be thinking, first of all, why should I go abroad? And I know you may have heard some of these stats and figures in some other talks before, but before we get started, I just thought it was worth emphasising the benefits of going abroad and thinking about why you should go abroad in the first place. So there's lots of recent research that's shown that an international experience will improve your employability, would be a great addition to your CV, and that graduate employers are really looking for and really appreciates what they call a global graduate. And research has also shown that having an international experience may even increase your future salary, which is great. And often students who've had an international opportunity will go on to receive a higher degree classification too, as you can see in the stats I've quoted here. Going abroad during your time here at Cardiff will also help you develop lots of key transferable skills such as teamwork, independence and problem solving and many more, and which you can sort of bring up in your future interviews and job applications and which employers are really looking for. So before we look at Australia and New Zealand specifically, I thought I'd give you an overview of the International Exchange Programme on offer at Cardiff. So the International Exchange Programme provides the opportunity to study abroad outside of Europe for a semester or a year. Undergraduate students are able to study outside of Europe for a semester or a year, depending on your degree programme. So the credits you gain abroad as well will contribute towards your degree at Cardiff University. And at Cardiff, we have partner universities all over the world, so not just in Australia and New Zealand, but also in the US, Canada, Singapore, Japan, Mexico, Peru, South Korea and Hong Kong. And it does depend, as I mentioned, on your school as to where you'd be able to go. So each school will have a different range of partners to offer, and you can find a full list of these partners on our intranet pages. You'll see that I've also put some information on here about finances, but I'll go over this in more detail later in the presentation. So first off, just a quick introduction to New Zealand and Australia. So New Zealand is the second and Australia is the sixth most popular international student destinations in the world, according to the Times Higher Education survey they did in 2020. Both are very popular destinations for travel and for study, and are some of the top destinations with our students. Actually, in fact, and the other day we did a poll on social media, and New Zealand was voted the top destination, and with Australia coming in third. So they really are our students' top destinations for studying abroad outside of Europe especially. So Australia and New Zealand are also really both well known for their high quality of life, and they've both ranked highly in the whole world, so 4th and 8th respectively for quality of life according to the website Numbeo. And it's also worth noting that both Australia and New Zealand have relatively similar teaching and learning cultures to the UK. So if you like the idea of going abroad, but would rather somewhere where the teaching won't be too different to what you're used to, Australia or New Zealand may be the destinations for you. So in terms of finding out which universities in Australia or New Zealand you may be able to study at, as mentioned, the first place you should check is the intranet page for your school. So if you search Spend Time Abroad on the intranet, you'll find that each school has a page where you can check your eligibility, as well as see a list of partners that have been especially selected for your school and have been course mapped to ensure they're suitable for you. There may also be different partners available depending on your specific degree programme. As you can see there on the School of English page, there are differences between the different degree programmes. So first off, here is a list of all of the partners we currently have in Australia, just for you to get an idea of the different destinations on offer. And as you can see here, certain partners are available for students from certain schools. And we currently have 12 partners in Australia situated all over the country, but please do check the intranet for the most up-to-date information. And here's a map for you to see where they're located in Australia, just in case your geography knowledge is as poor as mine. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see where most of them are located. And here is a list of the partners we currently have in New Zealand, and it's worth noting, as I mentioned with Australian partners, that they are subject to change, so do check the internet for the most up-to-date information. And again, just a map to show you that we have 2 partners located on North Island and 1 on South Island. So, do your research. This is our mantra this week. So when you're trying to decide on whether international exchange is right for you and on where you'd like to go, it's really important to do your research. And I will say this a few times today. And here are the main things that will help you decide on which destination is for you. And this is also how I've organised the rest of the session, so you have a better idea of each of these topics in relation to Australia and New Zealand specifically. So first of all, let's look at the academics abroad. And as you'll be studying abroad, academics should be a key part of your decision making. Just as you had to adjust to new ways of teaching and learning at Cardiff Uni, you will now need to do the same when you go abroad. And I've added some quotes here from some of our students who studied in Australia and New Zealand last year about the differences in teaching and assessment that they found during their time studying there. So first off, we have some quotes from Sophia and Kat, and I would say that overall students have found that the teaching environment and style isn't that different to Cardiff University. However, some classes may require your participation in discussion and maybe a marked component to the course, so do keep an eye out for that. And here are also some quotes from Ella and Sophia again. So you'll see here that it does seem that sometimes the assessments may be a little different, with more of a culture of more frequent, smaller assessments throughout the course and not just at the end. Also, most Australian universities use a slightly different grading system, using higher distinction, credit, pass and fail as their grading system. So keep this in mind, and your school can explain more about this and how grades are then converted back. But if you'd like to read more about how past students have found the teaching and learning environments in Australia and New Zealand, it's definitely worth looking at our Globetrotters blogging platform, where there are lots of blogs specifically about this topic. So do go and have a look on there if you want to read more about students' experiences in terms of academics. But yeah, I would say, and I think all these sort of quotes show that you will need to be prepared for new challenges, and you may need to learn in a new and different way, but that is a great challenge to have and is exciting as well. So as well as looking at the differences in teaching, it's really important to look at the modules available at the different partner universities to see if they line with your academic interests. So I've included this piece of advice here from an international exchange student who went to US actually, but just think it's a really good piece of advice because I think it really shows the importance of researching the modules. So many universities do host their module syllabi online, so you can compare this with Cardiff's offering. We would say speak to your school. In the first instance, each school has an exchange coordinator who can help advise on the academic side of studying abroad. So do talk to them about this in the first instance. You will need to be enrolled full-time whilst abroad, so you will be studying the equivalent of 60 Cardiff credits per semester abroad. And in terms of flexibility, I would say that you need to ask your school before you apply what flexibility do they offer in selecting modules. Could you potentially learn something you could maybe not learn or perhaps never learn at Cardiff University, or could you learn your subject from a different perspective? Also, it's worth asking your school if you will be taking replacement credits or undertaking a full year abroad. And being proactive in your module choices can help evidence your interest in your chosen field further and your decision-making skills. And these are great things that you can show in your future job applications. Even at that stage, just whilst you're researching, you're already building on those transferable skills. So just keep that in mind. I just wanted to mention briefly about prerequisites. So sometimes some courses will have prerequisites where they require that you've already completed certain other modules. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at different modules available at partners. And also just check if there are any restrictions for exchange students. Sometimes they might have a list of modules which is reserved specifically for exchange students. So just keep that in mind. So moving on to looking into the culture and location of the different destinations. So remember, you'll be living abroad, not just visiting, not just on holiday. So the local culture of where you live will have a huge impact on your study abroad experience. So make sure you do research the day-to-day life abroad, as well as cultural attitudes or differences. So looking at the culture, we know, or well, I was researching anyway, that New Zealand is one of the safest and friendliest places you can choose for your studies. And in 2019, they were named the world's second most peaceful country by the Global Peace Index. And Australia is also among the happiest countries in the world, according to the World Happiness Report. So these are great, but it still is worth researching researching their culture in more depth, and what are their attitudes towards women, for example, towards disability, sexuality, gender, ethnicity, or religion, and what groups, if any, are discriminated against and why. Are you going to be in a cosmopolitan city-based destination? If not, how could this affect you? Also, it might sound a bit strange, but dietary requirements is worth looking into that. So how might specific dietary or other requirements be met both on and off campus? So for example, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you may find it easier to meet your dietary requirements in a more city-based destination, for example, than a rural one. Laws, so maybe one of the most important ones, or one of the ones that you want to take into consideration, is what's the drinking age. Actually, in both New Zealand and Australia, this is 18, so it's the same as the UK. Also looking into the location and transport specifically. How will you get around? Will you need to commute to campus every day? Actually, most New Zealand towns and cities are relatively small, so you may be able to walk or cycle quite easily to your classes. So that's quite a nice thing to keep in mind. And also, but otherwise, if you do need to do a bit more travelling back and forth to campus, looking into the local transport systems is worthwhile as well, to see how frequently they go and how good they are and how well connected. In terms of climate, this is really important. So with Australia and New Zealand, remember that the seasons are at opposite times to those in the Northern Hemisphere. So when it's summer here, it'll be winter there. So also, actually, I got this advice from a few of our different ambassadors. So contrary to popular belief, it can get cold in Australia, and especially in the south. So if you're studying in Sydney, Melbourne or Adelaide, do make sure you pack some warmer clothes and a raincoat if you're going in the winter time. And in New Zealand, you know, the weather varies actually from warm and subtropical in the far north to cool and temperate in the far south. And also it is worth noting that both countries have really high levels of UV radiation, so much higher than the UK. So just to be careful in the summer especially. And I just noted here mental and emotional health support whilst abroad. So looking at what's available and double checking the services available to students in the partner institutions. And, you know, if this is something that's important to you, do then get in touch with us and we can help you with this. And I just also wanted to note that Cardiff Uni offers comprehensive advice on equality and diversity on the internet. And before you make an application to study abroad, you may want to research destinations to find out more information on this topic. But if you have any concerns with this as well, you can raise this with us and you can book an appointment with us as well. I just have a few extra pieces of advice to help you sort of look into the culture and location and sort of the day-to-day life in these countries. So speak with past participants and we can help you do this. You can read blogs, as I mentioned, from students who've studied abroad on our blog platform. I would recommend watching some YouTube videos or vlogs about the universities and cities you're looking into. You can get some really great insider information from those. And also just the good old-fashioned travel guides can also provide quite good information about local customs and culture. So after you research the culture and country-specific differences, you may wish to look into the campus or city environment a little more deeply. So this is something actually that many students overlook, but it can make a huge difference to your experience. So it is worth looking into. And you should ask similar questions really to what you would if you're applying for a UK university all over again. So things like, you know, is it a city-based university or more rural? And for example, here you can see the University of Technology Sydney, which is a city-based university, which has buildings located within Sydney city centre, whilst the University of Otago is a campus-based university, but located just outside of the city of Dunedin. And the University of Tasmania's main campus is located in the beachside suburb of Hobart called Sandy Bay campus, and you can see the sea actually in the background of that photo there. But also you may want to consider what would suit you best in terms of this and look at how this may impact on your social activities. If it's a campus-based uni, it's worth researching to see, you know, what activities are available on campus. But whereas with city-based universities, it may mean you'll need to travel around more to different buildings and living costs may be higher. Looking into how well networked it is, so looking at the trains or buses available, how far it is from the nearest airports. A lot of our students have reported that they have taken a lot of public transport to get around, so it is worth checking, as I mentioned, how efficient they are. And looking at how big is the campus or the university. For a benchmark, Cardiff Uni has 30,000 enrolled students, and it's worth also checking how many students live on campus or off campus, and into the accommodation, whether it's guaranteed or will you need to look for private housing, and looking into the costs of this if this is required. But also host universities will provide advice on where you can look for private accommodation if this is something you need to do. As mentioned, I mentioned about activities on campus, but yeah, looking at the clubs or societies available as well, if these are important to you. Do they hold events for international students? Also, what are the term dates? So actually for Australia and New Zealand, their term will often begin in July, so quite a bit earlier than most to the UK anyway, so you would need to take this into account. So now we've gone over the first few things you need to research. Let's move on to another big question, how much will it cost? So I've outlined sort of the main 4 costs you'll need to consider here. We have living costs, accommodation, visas and health insurance, and I'll just go into a bit more detail on each of them now. So first of all, to help you research these costs, the best place to start is looking on the internet, and I know I've already mentioned this, but it is a great place to start. So we've got on the international exchange pages, we've dedicated a page about costs to consider for an international exchange. And when we built this page, we surveyed our partners, and we do every year. We surveyed our partner universities and asked them for specific costs students may face, whether that's visa costs, health insurance, or evidence of funds. And it's a really comprehensive page, so please do check it out during your financial planning. We also have a really nifty thing called the Global Opportunities Costs Calculator, which is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin, and is a really great way to help you work out exactly what you'll be able to afford on your time abroad. And this is linked to on that cost to consider page. There's a link on there to this calculator, so do take a look. So in terms of looking at living costs, studying abroad is similar to applying to university all over again, and you will need to ask the question, what can I afford? So the cost of living will vary from city to city, even within the same country, just as it does in the UK, really. So if you think of the difference between London and Cardiff, there's quite a big difference. And actually, as you can see here, I've put an example of 2 universities in different cities, both within Australia, and they actually have very different costs of living. Therefore, it just shows how important it is to carefully map out your potential expenses and to look at ways in which you can reduce the costs potentially. And if you haven't decided on a university abroad, then a good tip would be to start off by researching the cost of living generally. So looking into living costs is a really good way to help you look at the differences between the different cities and destinations. So if you look at the overall cost of living, then look at the specific on-campus costs. So start big and then go small. And a simple search, so if you look trying to work out what the living costs are in different places, a simple search for the partner university's name and living costs should bring up the university's web pages on estimated costs per week, per month, term or year. And you can also use this website that I've put here, Numbeo. So we use this quite often, and you can compare the costs of living in a specific city abroad with costs of living in Cardiff. And I just want to add that financial planning can be a bit overwhelming at first. I know it can be, and especially when you're looking at going abroad. But this is therefore a really good time to book an appointment with us. So we have a lot of experience in finding a suitable partner for each student, and we can really help you find the information you need. So do get in touch. So the next key cost I had on that list to consider, and one of the biggest costs you'll face, is accommodation. So here you can see an example of different accommodation costs across different universities. Most universities offer a range of different options, ranging from shared studio flats, where you'd be sharing your room with one other student, to shared flats with 4 to 8 other people and a shared kitchen and bathroom, to individual self-contained flats. So there's a whole range of different types, but obviously the price will vary depending on the type you choose. But I've just listed here some questions you might want to ask when you're looking at accommodation. Excuse me, something. There we go. And are there single rooms available, or will you be sharing a room? So sometimes that is an option. And actually, if you're looking to keep costs down, sharing a room may be a really good way of doing this. Will you be sharing a bathroom or a kitchen with other students? Also, if student accommodation is limited on campus, or you're unable to obtain a place in university residences, it is worth looking into what private accommodation is available. So Please note that, there are some universities which do expect students to find private accommodation. Even if you apply for university residences, it is worth looking in the private market as well, just as a precaution. But as I said earlier, the host university will be able to help you and guide you towards where's best to look for this. Also look at how far the accommodation is from the university, and finally, you'll need to consider if you need to pay a deposit or if there are any other fees involved. I've also the last question they've included is how flexible can I be, as these costs, accommodation costs, do greatly depend on how flexible you're willing to be. So next up, we have health insurance, and of course health insurance is an incredibly important part of your international exchange, and you will need to get this. It is mandatory for study placements in both Australia and New Zealand. And here are some health insurance costs provided by partner universities in Australia and New Zealand to give you an idea. And this information is listed on that same costs to consider intranet page I mentioned. Otherwise, you can Google the name of the university and health insurance or international exchange, and you can visit their health pages for this information and for their specific policies. And for those of you who are currently applying to study abroad, I would just say, just be sure that you read your policies really carefully and you know exactly what you are and aren't covered for. And finally, the last cost I wanted to touch upon is the cost of a visa. So I just want to say, first of all, that we're not trained visa advisors. So the best place to find out information about visas will be through the embassy website or partner university. So you'll need to apply for a study visa whether you decide to study in Australia or New Zealand. And I've included a general idea of the costs for the visa. But as I say, the best place to find out more about the costs, about how to apply and the requirements is by looking on those embassy websites for the country. And just to let you know, as a part of the visa application for New Zealand, that you would need to provide evidence of funds, and the amount you'd be required to evidence would vary depending on if you were going for a semester or a year. So it is just worth researching that fully if you do decide on New Zealand. As I've mentioned before, take a look at that cost to consider intranet page, as we have given a general idea of the costs of different visas, and have also linked to the country embassy pages, so they're easy to find. And also do speak to your host university, because they are really well placed to advise you on the visa that they require you to get, and they can support you with the visa application process and provide you with the required documentation once you're accepted onto the programme. And I just wanted to mention here, so sometimes it can feel a bit awkward, some students do feel a bit awkward or uncomfortable about reaching out to the host, especially when looking at evidence of funds or visa advice. So if you do have any questions about anything, but you're not sure who to ask, then just let us know, and we can always put you in contact with the right people or pass on your queries to the partner university on your behalf. That's no problem at all. So it's really important to consider all of the previous considerations as a total package for your study abroad experience and in your research into different partners. So I've just put together an example of 2 universities. So we've got one in New Zealand and one in Australia. And just as an example of all of the aspects you should research and the differences to look out for. So I'll just run through some of the differences with you. So if you're looking at the University of Otago there, it's a large campus university. However, it is only 5 minutes from the city. It is ranked really highly in New Zealand, and it's ranked 2nd. It has over 150 clubs. It's got about 21,000 enrolled students, so it is a little smaller than Cardiff. Also, you can see there the costs I've put in, so I've calculated sort of the cost of living, health insurance. You'd also need to look at accommodation costs. And in terms of weather, it's quite extreme. So they've got quite extremely seasonal weather with snow in the winter, but it gets really hot in the summer. And then looking at Queensland University of Technology, it's a city-based university, so it's situated right in Brisbane. And it's only 20 minutes from the international airports, and Brisbane itself is a really large city, so it's the third most populous in Australia. They have nearly 50,000 enrolled students, so it is a bigger university than Cardiff. It's worth noting that they have got limited campus accommodation, so you'd want to look into their accommodation options, and they will also provide advice on private accommodation, so you can have a look there on their website. And then you've got the costs there to consider, and with the climate, they've got a subtropical climate, so it's pretty much warm or hot weather most of the year, so that sounds quite nice, with a little bit of rain in the summer. So just to help with your research, and if you're stuck between a couple of partners, I would say pulling together a list like this of a comparison list really would be worth putting together to help you make your decision. Okay, so we've gone over some of the costs involved, and now we'll just move on to looking at the funding available. So first of all, I'd just like to remind you, if you didn't already know, that you won't need to pay tuition fees to the partner, as you'll be on an exchange, and we'll be welcoming exchange students here from the same institutions that you'd be going to. So you won't need to pay any tuition fees to the partner, and you'll just carry on paying Cardiff University tuition fees as usual. So those going abroad for a full year will also be able to have a significant reduction on their fees, and you'd only need to pay 15% of your regular tuition fees to Cardiff for that year. We also have the Global Opportunities Bursary, and this is a non-means tested bursary that eligible students can receive to help towards the cost of their exchange. These bursaries are subject to annual review and are to be confirmed for next year, so haven't yet been confirmed. But just to give you an idea, students going abroad this year were eligible to receive a one-off bursary of £700 for a year and £500 for a semester. And finally, student finance. So you are entitled to receive the same student loan or grant whilst abroad, and some students may even get a higher overseas rate for those as well. There's also a student finance travel grant, which I'll just go on into a bit more detail in a second. And finally, if you are thinking of going abroad and you have any questions about student finances, then we have a great advice and money team here at Cardiff who can help. So their email address is there, but you can find them on the internet as well. And so, as I mentioned, there is something called the travel grant, and this is provided by Student Finance, so it is external to our offices. The travel grant is a reimbursement grant, so eligible students may be able to claim back some of their costs, so for flights, medical insurance or visa costs, for example. And the amount you can claim is dependent on your household income, and the amount varies as well between Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales. So we've got a really comprehensive fact sheet actually on this on the internet, so please do download that for more detail. And just want to say the Student Finance Travel Grant can really help actually with some of those costs that you'll incur, so it's definitely worth looking into just to check if you're eligible for it. Okay, so you've taken a look at our partners, you've fully researched the different options, and now I can hear you ask, how do I apply? So first up, here is an overview of the internal application process. So just for you to kind of get an idea of how things work. I just want you to keep in mind though that when you can go depends on your school and degree programme, and some schools may have a slightly different process, so it is a good idea to check this with them before. So you'll usually begin the process of applying around a year or so before you're due to go abroad. And as an example, students due to go abroad next autumn are now in the process of applying. So for most students, you will need to apply within the school first, and the school will send you the details of an online application to complete by email. So you complete this online application form, and within that you'll be asked to detail your top 3 destinations, and a great thing about that is you can include any European destinations as well in your top 3. So if you're undecided between international or European exchange, you can include that in your options. The school will then review applications and let us know of the successful applicants. If you're then successful, we will then formally nominate you to the host university, and if the nomination is accepted by them, you'll then need to apply directly to the partner, but don't worry, we are here to help you with that. And as mentioned, for international exchange, you'll begin your application for a visa, that's normally required. And finally, you'll then just need to attend a pre-departure session, which is typically held in March or April for those going abroad in autumn, and in November for those going abroad in spring. So the message I just want you to sort of take away from this session is that sometimes it can seem like there is quite a lot to do when studying abroad and applying and looking into it, but when broken up into stages, it's really manageable, and the key is just to be a bit organised and stick to any deadlines there are, and we're also here to support you through. So before we hear from some of our ambassadors about their experiences of studying in Australia and New Zealand, I just wanted to let you know about this Discover Go notebook we've put together this year, which should be helpful actually when you're looking at the different partners. And this online notebook we've created contains materials and information about some of our partners, and we've also broken it up into different regions, as you can see on the left there, for both international exchange and European exchanges, and you can find the link to it on the Discover Global Opportunities Week campaign page on the internet. So if you just search Discover Global Opportunities Week, and you should find it on there. So do we have Martha is our first ambassador? I'm not sure if she's joined.
Hi, Helen. She couldn't join.
No, that's fine. Yep. No worries. So we also have Harvey. So Harvey, I believe, is on the call. Hi, Harvey.
Hello.
Hello, hi. Thanks for joining us. And first of all, can you just introduce yourself and sort of tell us which school you're from and where you went on your international exchange?
Hi, I'm Harvey. I'm part of the Share School doing ancient history and archaeology, and I went to the University of Waikato in Hamilton, New Zealand, which is mid-North Ireland.
Fab, thank you. And how would you sort of say, how was your experience abroad? Did you, what was the best part of your experience, would you say?
Probably meeting new friends and then traveling New Zealand with them.
That sounds good. And would you have any sort of top tips for anyone considering going on a placement abroad, or maybe for someone who's sort of sitting on the fence about it?
I could definitely recommend it. It's definitely improved my academic life and just in general. So making friends and kind of growing up out there. But just kind of researching anything you're unsure of, just get more information on. There'll be a reason why you're unsure of it, and just getting the research in and knowing what to expect when you're out there kind of will help them fears.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's building up expectations, so you know what should be happening once you get there, so you're not completely sort of caught off guard or anything like that. Also, I just wanted to ask, so how did you find, were there many differences, would you say, to the teaching style compared to what you're used to at Cardiff?
Yeah, it differed slightly in the sense that Cardiff, they kind of leave you most semester with maybe like one essay and then an exam at the end, whereas in Waikato they kind of keep on top of you. Like you might have a weekly quiz every week or 2 weeks, and then tutorial participation is say 10%. So by the end of the semester you kind of totaled up say 50%, then you do a 40% essay or something. So your grades marked on the whole year rather than your performance on a particular essay or exam.
Great, that sounds good. Yeah, so it kind of spreads it all out across the time you're there. Great. And do you have any other last top tip or anything you'd like to say before we move on to the end of the presentation?
Definitely recommend going and just embrace every kind of experience and opportunity, because you'll definitely enjoy it and you'll get the most out of the experience that way.
Perfect. Thanks, Harvey. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us and sort of sharing your experience. Before we finish, I just wanted to sort of highlight as well some of the other sessions that are happening this week. So today we do have a session from one of our partners in Australia. So the University of Tasmania has a session at 2:30. So if you'd like to hear more about studying in Australia and specifically at that university, do come along. And it's also just a great place to ask the questions you might have directly to one of our partners. And yeah, the link's available on that campaign page I mentioned. I also wanted to say, as well as that, we also have ambassador Q&As today and tomorrow at 5 p.m. So if you want to speak to our ambassadors like Harvey about their experiences and want to ask them questions about their time abroad, then do come and join us at those ambassador Q&As today and tomorrow at 5 p.m. Again, the links to that are on that same campaign page. So do join us. I also just wanted to show you, so those are the sessions today, and then tomorrow we are not tomorrow. those are the sessions for Thursday. We've got a Study in Canada session and also a session by one of our partners in Canada, and then on Friday our focus will be on Asia with a talk as well from one of our partners from Singapore. So before we go on to questions, just so you know where to find out more information, as I mentioned, do go on the internet, search Spend Time Abroad for a full list of partners. Once you've done that, if you've checked out our internet pages, checked out different partners, and you'd like to have a chat, please make an appointment with us. You can just email us and we can sort that out for you. You can also follow us on social media through the Cardiff Uni Instagram account and also the Cardiff University Students Facebook group. And we also have a newsletter that we send out about once a month with information on any upcoming deadlines, new opportunities, things like that. And you can sign up to that if you just scan that QR code on the top right. Okay, so now we'll just move on to questions. So let me see if there were any questions in the Q&A. We've got a couple in there, so do type any more in if you have any. First off, so what does a year abroad count as for the end of your degree? Is it 10%? I do have my colleague Jenny as well on the call, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, but this does depend on your school and your degree programme. So this would be a question you need to check with your school as to how much it will count. Jenny, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, so for I mean, it's a good kind of rule that generally it is around 10% for a year abroad. Obviously, for a semester, it kind of counts a lot more. But yeah, please check with your school because it can vary slightly. But generally, for a year abroad, it's around 10%.
Great, thank you. And the next question I have here is, can I apply individually if my school doesn't have a partner university in Australia? I'm studying BSc Biomedical Sciences. Good question. I think
yeah, sorry.
Do you want to take that, Jenny? Because we had a similar question before.
Yeah, so with the BSc in Biomedical Sciences, I believe that students have the opportunity to take part in a professional training year abroad. It's slightly different from a full year abroad in that it's research rather than kind of a study abroad. So I know on the Biosciences Study Abroad page, we have some partners that do accept PTY students that we work with. We can certainly have a look for you to see if there's any in Australia that could be suitable. So for that student, I'd advise please email into us just because you have a slightly specific case and it might be easier for us to manage if you email in. Also get in touch with Biosciences. They have a great mobility team and they'll be able to help you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenny. Any more questions? If you do have a question, just pop it in the Q&A. I'll wait a couple of extra minutes, and whilst I give you a bit of time to do that, I'll just also show you the last slide. I just wanted to ask if potentially you'd be able to complete our feedback survey. So this is the first time we've run an online Discover Global Opportunities Week in place of our usual Global Opportunities Fair. So we'd really like to get your feedback. And yeah, if you can spare 2 minutes just to provide your thoughts, that would be really great. And you can follow this link, but I will also just paste it actually in the Q&A as an announcement, hopefully. Oh, Jenny, can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. Nope, no more questions, I don't think. But if you do have any questions following today, then as I mentioned, just get in touch with us via email at studyabroad@cardiff.ac.uk. So thank you very much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you at some of our other sessions this week.